So, welcome back to the why and the how. Today we are joined by Armin, a consulting engineer at Jamf, and someone a lot of you will probably already know from the MacAdmin community. Now, Armin is the person behind Jamf Setup Manager. He does a lot more than that, but let's just keep that as the intro for now. So, this series that Elmo and I run is about why something matters before we then talk about how it actually works. And the why today is quite simple. It's the first experience a user has with a Mac that sets the tone for everything that follows. Now, Setup Manager was built to make that first experience consistent, clear, and intentional. So I'm going to very quickly frame the problem. Elmo's going to add some real world context from his experience using this tool. And then we'll get into the fun stuff with Armin, where we'll show you the tool in action and give you some more insight and background on what it does and why it exists. So, as I mentioned, onboarding is the first moment that IT's work becomes visible to the end user. Before this, everything is in the back end, but now the user is watching. So when someone opens a brand new Mac, and if the setup is slow or it's unclear or it looks unfinished, that first impression is what sticks. And they don't blame the process, they often blame IT. Now, the reality in most enterprise environments is that critical software, security tools, and configurations, they need to be installed before the device is actually usable, which can take time. And without visibility into what's happening, your users might sit in limbo, they don't know if it's working or stuck or broken, they might call the help desk, or even worse, they'll close the Mac and walk away. So the real question is, can we make this process happen as slick and professional as possible for the user? So that's the problem on paper. Hopefully, that is. I'm very aware that Armin is the expert on this subject, but that is the problem on paper. But Elmo, you've seen this play out in real customer environments. So do you want to talk through how this looks when you've had hands-on with the tool with a customer?
Yeah, and I guess first as well, there's a lot of ways we can do the how of implementing that user onboarding. If we think of the existing tools we've got in, let's say, our Jamf tool set, we have customers already using, of course, the settings within our automated device enrollment pre-stage options for, let's say, Mac devices. We have built-in onboarding tools with things like self-service and macOS onboarding that are native within Jamf's tool set. You can, of course, have those custom policies that are maybe triggered after your enrollment has completed, or maybe using custom triggers as well. But the whole point is it's always nice to have more options. But yeah, Armin, I'll kind of let you frame it yourself in terms of maybe why you built this tool and how you've seen maybe some customers yourself actually use it as well before we jump into the live demoing and seeing it of it in action.
Well, initially, Setup Manager was the tool we wanted for ourselves. As consulting engineers in our team, we often work with customers on the rollout, on piloting new deployments. And there, as you said, there are plenty of tools out there, but none of them quite hit the spot that we wanted it to be. We also, and this is me saying it, but I got very tired of editing shell scripts to configure the workflow. I enjoy scripting and building scripts. You might have noticed when you follow me online, but for these purposes, I thought we need something more robust and something that's integrated into the Jamf solutions that we have and macOS. So that was the motivation to start building our own tool. And once we had that somewhat working, we realized, yeah, this is going to be useful for so many other situations. Like you said, you can have a very simple zero-touch deployment where the user just sits there for 5 minutes and waits until everything is installed, and then they can go ahead and create their account and log in and start working. But also more complex workflows that we'd like to call the single-touch workflow, where the tech or a partner pre-provisions the device and then hands it over to the user, and the user doesn't even have to wait for the installations anymore. But us as IT and IT security, we can be certain that all the tools are installed and configured before the user even touches the device. That's the main goal.
Yep. And would you want to maybe take us through kind of how someone would get started then with Setup Manager? Where would they
Yeah,
go?
so
What would they do to initially get hands-on if they want to bring this to life in their environment?
So yeah, I've prepared a little something here, but basically this setup that I'm going to show here, this is basically what we have in the quick start on the Jamf Setup Manager repository. So we're sharing Jamf Setup Manager through a GitHub repository. That's just a nice and easy way to share the documentation as well as the download. And we can also have the issues and discussions and other things on there. So this is the website where you will find Setup Manager. We can probably share the link in the show notes, right? I've
Correct.
always wanted to say that. So you will get an overview here of what it is and how to find discussions and groups. Like on the MacAdmins Slack, we have a very active group around this, and even documentation. Among the documentation, one of them here is the Quick Start, which is basically what I'm going to go through right now, but visually, which just gives you a quick setup on how to get started with Setup Manager, get it going very quickly, and that should already give you an idea on how you can use it and how you can extend it. Most people I've seen who went through the Quick Start were immediately adding things and stuff. The one thing I definitely need from here is the installer. You will find that over here under releases. So we can go in here and get the latest version. It's 1.4.3 just from last week. So we regularly update and actively work on that. And you want to download the PKG installer that's attached here to this version. Then we go into my Jamf Pro instance. Setup Manager works with Jamf School and Jamf Pro. The Setup Manager with Jamf School is a bit different, but since Jamf School added enrollment packages last year, it's fairly similar. There's of course documentation also for Jamf School, but we're going to do it with Jamf Pro today. And the first thing we need to do is we need to upload that one package that we just downloaded. So I'm going into settings, packages. I have a bit of stuff in here. And then if I go in here, I can just grab that and drag it in and save it. This is a small package. It's not very big. And Jamf Pro will upload it quickly and processes quickly. It is good to wait for the processing to be complete because otherwise the pre-stage won't work if the processing isn't completed. And then we add it to the pre-stage. So I've prepared a pre-stage here. You probably already have a pre-stage in your system. If you're testing out Setup Manager, you probably want to create a new pre-stage for the testing. Duplicate the one you have or just create a new one from scratch. Really depends on how your setup is. And then we go in here and add the Setup Manager package that we just uploaded. It is very important that you switch the distribution point from none to cloud distribution point. I had that just earlier when I was preparing this. I was like, why is this not working? Remember to set it to the cloud distribution point, otherwise it will not work. If you happen to have an on-prem Jamf Pro, it still works, but there's a bit more work you have to do here. Read the documentation. So I'm going to save the pre-stage here, which is the first part of what we need to do. We need to upload the package and add it to the pre-stage. The next step is we actually need to tell Setup Manager what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to look. And to do that, we don't edit a shell script, as I mentioned before, but we use a configuration profile. So I can go in here and create a new configuration profile. I'm going to call this Setup Manager Quick Start. You can call that whatever you want. It helps if you type it correctly that people recognize it later. I have an enrollment category for this. Computer level and install automatically is exactly what we want. We go to application and custom settings and we choose Jamf applications because, well, this is a Jamf application. Go in and add the com.jamf setup manager domain is here at the very bottom of the list. We choose the latest version, and there's only one variant that we need to choose. And that gives us a form editor with the most important things that we need to set up. So we can put a custom icon in there, we can put a custom title in there, and a custom starting message. So this is really nice. The title would be something like Setup Manager. I'm going to use the name of my homepage for this demo. I can put a custom icon in there. You can have something that you install locally, so you'd have a second pre-stage package that installs your local images locally, so you can use them for branding. I want to avoid that, so I actually am using an HTTP address that is just the logo of my website. This actually points to my WordPress website. You can upload it to a web server. If you're an organization, you probably don't want to use WordPress website, but this works. And then I can put a message here. You can put as much as you want in here. You can actually even use Markdown in the message for highlighting. You can see in here that there's tons of links in the custom configuration profile UI here. So if you want to know how the message works, we can click on this and it will open in a new tab and it will link into the Setup Manager repository exactly into the documentation for the message key, and where it says like this is the default string that you can get. You can localize the string, you can use substitutions and Markdown, and then there will be a bunch of examples. The examples are an XMLP list, but it gives you an idea of what you want to do, and you should find these links pretty much everywhere in the custom interface in Jamf Pro here. So we've set the icon, the title, and the message, which we will see later, goes in the top half of the window, and now we have to tell it what actually to do. And Setup Manager calls these enrollment actions or actions. And I have an array here. I just clicked on Add an Action to add the first one. And the first one I'm going to use from the list of available actions, because we can do a lot of things here. But the first one I'm going to use is Installomator. Installomator is another open source project that we're using here, which is basically a script that automates the download, verification, and installation of more than 1,000 apps by now. And we built that into Setup Manager because we think at this stage Installomator and Setup Manager just go really well together. It's like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich for the admin. This is really the perfect combination. I want to install Google Chrome, so I'm giving the label Google Chrome. This is the description that the user sees. We could put anything in here, but keep it simple. Is very easy. For the icon, I've also prepared a icon that is available for download. And then the next thing we have to say is, what is the Installomator label? So the label is how Installomator calls all the different things it can install. And we are going to use Google Chrome and the package version of Google Chrome, because if you can, always prefer the package version over the DMG version. So that's our first action. We are using Installomator to install Google Chrome. We're not sticking there because, I mean, most deployments are more complex than that, and we can't just get away with Installomator, as great as it is. Another action type that we have in here is a Jamf policy trigger, which in Jamf Pro gives me the ability to trigger custom policies. I can open my policies, and I have a policy prepared here, which I call Desktopper Manage. This installs the Desktopper tool, which can set the wallpaper or desktop picture. And it also installs the launch agent and other things that I need, that this will set the desktop to a certain picture. So I have one package that installs the pictures with the branding, and the other one installs Desktopper and a launch agent, so that this will set the desktop picture, the wallpaper as it's called now, at the user's first login. This is a great thing. I like to do this when I do deployment workflows, enrollment workflows, because as Adam pointed out earlier, this is the first contact with the end user, and we're branding the device immediately, telling them like, this is not just a normal Mac, this is a managed Mac, this is an organization Mac. it's somewhat different. And this is a very friendly way of getting across that message. So this policy has a custom trigger, not very creatively named wallpaper, but we're going to use that. So also the label, this is what is visible to the user in Setup Manager. In this case, we're going to use an SF symbol. So there's an app from Apple called SF Symbols. These are icons that are built into the operating system that we can use in applications. So we can look for various icons here. I'm going to use the photo one. So it's named photo. This is one that I'm going to use to represent the desktop picture. So I can go in here and I can tell Setup Manager by prefixing symbol and a colon that we're using an SF symbol, and then the name that I just saw, which is photo. And then the policy trigger, I'm going to do wallpaper, which will trigger the policy with the custom trigger wallpaper. All good things are 3. So the last one we're going to do is a shell command. This allows us to run very simple one-line shell commands directly from Setup Manager. It's amazing how many things you can do with a simple one-line shell command. Then if you want more complex things, you can use a policy with a complete shell script. In this case, I'm going to do set time zone, because Macs come with the default time zone of the US Pacific time, Cupertino, which is annoying to everybody else in the rest of the world. In this case, I'm going to use a different source. I'm going to borrow the icon from the clock application that comes with the system. So I have to focus for a moment to type this correctly. I'm just going to give it the path to where the clock application is stored, and then Setup Manager knows to use that icon. Again, I don't have to install my own. I could, but I don't have to. The command I'm going to use lives in USR bin and is called system setup. And it takes 2 arguments, which I need to add one at a time. And I want to set it to Europe, Paris, because that's where I am right now. But you would set your own time zone here. So we've set up our configuration profile. We have a custom icon, title, message, and 3 actions. One that uses Installomator to install Google Chrome. One that uses a Jamf policy to install and set a wallpaper or desktop picture, and the last one that sets the time zone. So we can save this now. We're not done yet. But first of all, this is in the UI. We can see how that looks, but we can also see the property list version. And Setup Manager can start out very simple with just a handful of actions, but you will soon want to configure all kinds of odds and ends, and Setup Manager allows you to do many of those, and you will probably find yourself editing this XML property list fairly soon, because you can unlock some great things with it. Like every configuration profile, we need to scope it. So I'm going to scope it to a smart group that I created. You could use all computers, but I created a smart group which contains all the computers associated or enrolled with a specific pre-stage. And I'm going to add that so we can look at these smart groups here and look at this particular smart groups. And it is just the enrollment method is pre-stage enrollment with this particular pre-stage. That way I'm segregating the computers that enrolled with Setup Manager with my particular pre-stage from all the others. It's a nice way of testing things out. Even if you have a sandbox that you're testing in, you can separate this from other enrollment methods. And then when you're moving it into your main deployment later, then this is an even smarter and better way of segregating it from the rest of the computers that were enrolled differently. So we're scoping it to that particular group, but we also have to add the configuration profile to the pre-stage. The reason being, Setup Manager is installed in the pre-stage and launches in the pre-stage and will launch very, very early. So we want to really make sure it gets the configuration profile, which is where we need to put it both in the pre-stage and scope it to the device. If you're missing one of the two, the profile might go away somewhere along the way, and that would not be good. So that's all the setup we need to do. In the end, we check that the computer that we're testing with is scoped to the pre-stage, and then we can wipe the computer and test it out. So this computer is freshly wiped and ready to be enrolled. So I'm going to select my region. I'm glad I didn't choose French as the system language, because that makes things really look weird. I click on enroll and it will download. So we see that after clicking enroll, the pre-stage stuff happened and Setup Manager launched, and Setup Manager is actually launching over the Setup Assistant right now. So the user sees what we want to do and what we need to do and nothing else. During the getting ready phase, it is actually waiting for Jamf Pro to install the framework in the background, and also runs the first inventory update or recon in the background. So we know that our smart groups will be working right from the get-go, and we don't have to wait for anything else. And now that the Jamf Pro framework is there and Setup Manager got the enrollment complete signal from Jamf Pro, it launches into the enrollment actions that we configured. So we see the 3 enrollment actions that we did, each with their own icon. Above it, we see our custom icon and title and message, and it's working through the different steps. So Google Chrome is already complete. It's downloaded and installed. We see that with the green check mark. It installed or ran our wallpaper policy, which installs 2 packages. They're not very big. And then the one shell script for setting the time zone ran really, really quickly. Setup Manager is finished. It will continue automatically in a certain number. You can configure that, of course. And we can also hit continue, and which will reveal behind Setup Manager the normal macOS setup process. So we can go in here and create our account with a good password that nobody's ever going to guess for the demo here, and walk through. This is where the user would take over. Either the user watched the installation first, or the tech did that and then handed the machine over to the user. But at this point, the user is back in control. They will see all the panes that you configured in the pre-stage that they can see or not see. We get select your time zone because I actually disabled location services, and then macOS will prompt for the time zone, but we already see that Setup Manager pre-configured this to the right time zone that we want to have. It's not on Cupertino. The user gets to choose dark or light mode. Some user choice is definitely recommended. And then while the user account and home directory are being created, there's a bit of a delay that Apple introduced in Tahoe, which we get to watch. But once we get to the desktop, we see that our custom configuration with the desktop, the wallpaper picture, takes hold, and we can go ahead and launch Chrome because it's already installed, and we have Chrome right there. Of course, you could install other productivity apps or browsers as well.
Yeah, it looks great, Armin. I think that's a great sneak peek in terms of what you can do, how you can get started with Setup Manager. Maybe a few questions that we could go through since we've now seen the end user experience as well as the admin experience to this. We saw that there are a lot of options that we can configure, but would you kind of give any recommendations or guidance to someone if they're just getting started and they're a bit unsure what they want to add to that end user experience?
Yeah. So the first thing you want to add is more installations, right? Everybody wants to do that. And the next thing that everybody wants to do is more branding and customization. I didn't show that, but you can add custom colors and banners to make it look more like the branding of your organization rather than a generic tool. First of all, the documentation on the repository, and you can link to it from we saw the links to it from the user interface in Jamf Pro, or you can go directly to the document and look at the various options there. It can get a bit overwhelming, especially in the beginning, because Setup Manager has a ton of options by now. And I would strongly recommend joining the Jamf Setup Manager channel in the MacAdmins Slack, because I hang around there and try to help, but there are literally hundreds of other admins who are using Setup Manager actively, who will share their advice and opinions and probably point you in the right direction if you're wondering how a certain thing can work or should work.
Yeah, good plug for the MacAdmins Slack if you're not already in there. Many reasons to be. This is just another.
Yeah, if you've come this far listening and you're not part of that Slack channel, then you need to pause and go and join it right away. I mean, I can listen to you talk all day long. You've got one of those voices that just commands my my attention. But I guess one closing question from me, and without naming any names, what's the kind of best example or most innovative or even fun use of this that you've worked with a customer or seen in the wild?
I have seen some people get really creative with the customization, with the icons and everything. So without naming a name, an airline we have worked with used for all of their icons in these steps different icons that you might see at an airport, which I thought was just beautifully done and very fun. They actually hid what they're installing in the background and just had different steps of airline names, but in the background applications were being installed and security tools and configurations. Very cute use of it. I'm continually surprised how people use all the graphical and color customization options to really make Setup Manager in their environment look very, very different. That's really nice.
Well, thanks a lot, Armin, for joining us today. I think that really shows us how someone can get started with this, and also hopefully paint the picture of why you'd want to maybe implement this in your environment as well. Any closing remarks from you, Adam, as well?
Yeah, I think like where we always try to land on this show is on the outcome, right? So I think the outcome here isn't just a nicer enrollment screen or a smoother config profile. It's your new hire or your existing employee opens their Mac, they see a professional branded experience, and by the time they reach the desktop, everything works. Right? The security tools are on, the apps are installed, there's no tickets, there's no waiting, there's no cool IT. And ultimately that matters because the faster someone is able to be productive, the faster you as a business are getting a return on that hire. And the IT team that ultimately delivered the experience, they've just earned trust on day one before they've even had to ask the user to do anything. So that's not just an IT win, it's ultimately a business win. And that's really the difference between managing devices and actually enabling people, which hopefully some of our listeners, that is what their goals are and trying to do. So Armin, thank you very much for joining us. Elmo, pleasure as always. And to everyone watching and listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.